that keys are to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. This is a question you never want to be asking at this point in the season. Here we are at the beginning of December, and we're asking the question, is the 49ers season over? And there's plenty of ways to look at this because the 49ers right now are sitting at 5-7 in the basement in the NFC West, and it looks like the playoffs are becoming ever so far away for the 49ers. It just feels like they can't reach out and touch it. Every time it feels like they're going to get on a roll and they're going to potentially turn this thing around, something happens. And now more injuries, more concern. Is this football team destined to just have a terrible season? Is this season going to go by the wayside as one? The 49ers just couldn't get things together, whether that was injury-wise or lack of execution, or, potentially having to replace key players. It just hasn't worked out for the 49ers. And should they decide that this season's over? I think it's an interesting conversation because the 49ers are finding themselves in a position they haven't been in since 2020. In 2020, the injuries were through the roof, and I think even those injuries were worse than these injuries. But the 49ers knew their season was over early on. They had a major injury at quarterback. They lost Nick Bosa for the season. They were just ravaged by injuries like we've never seen before. And now they're in a situation where they're ravaged by injuries again, but no one in the NFC West is really doing anything to pull away. You look up and yes, Seattle is 2 games ahead, and the 49ers are a reason they're 2 games ahead. The 49ers don't lose that game to Seattle a few weeks ago. Well, that changes the whole complexion of the NFC West now, doesn't it? That would mean that the 49ers are 1 game behind everybody, and you're sitting right there in a situation to win. The key part is the 49ers aren't out of this thing yet. They're not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. So what does Kyle Shanahan and the players feel about kind of phoning in this season and walking away? What do the fans believe the 49ers should do? Because fans automatically want to turn to let's prepare for next year. Let's prepare for the draft. And I think that is a normal thought process for fans. It's like, look at how bad we're playing. There's no way this team is a championship caliber football team. Let's move on to 2025 and focus on that. And I think that is a solid approach for a fan base. That's how they look at it. And it's solid because, yeah, there's always next season and you want to kind of count on next season. But here's why it won't make sense to the players. Because the players only play for now. There's no guarantee on next season. There's no guarantee that all of a sudden 2025 is going to give you better fortunes than you got in 2024. There's also no guarantee you're going to be on this 49ers football team or even in the league for some of these players. So for them, they compete until time runs out, until it's over. And I know we're looking at the Packers had a big victory of the 49ers, and then the Buffalo Bills, who are, in my opinion, the best team in the NFL right now. Yeah, you lost big, and I think that's frustrating for a football team. But does that signal that this season's over? We're going to get into it. We're also going to talk about a lot of the injuries and what the 49ers have to do and where I feel the 49ers are going forward and if it's time to just pull the plug and look towards 2025. And in some cases, it might. So this is going to be an interesting one. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. And if you're going to bet with BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball to NHL and UFC. Head to BetOnline today and don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. So first off, I want to talk about a couple of key injuries because I think that's going to play in to the 49ers thought process on whether or not to continue, on this path of trying to make the playoffs. And you're losing Christian McCaffrey for the rest of the regular season, that's for sure. He's going to be out for at least 6 weeks. There's 5 regular season games left, which means likely Christian McCaffrey's out for the season. Now, that would play a determining factor in whether you shut him down or not if the season was over. So if you were thinking the season was over already, this doesn't really change your mindset on Christian McCaffrey. You were going to shut him down already. Try to make sure that those tendonitis is a lot better next season and have him prepare. Now, where it gets a little bit interesting for the 49ers is if they decide the season isn't over and they're pushing for the playoffs, which I believe this team will do until they're mathematically out. I just think that's how Kyle Shanahan, the coaching staff, and the players feel, is compete, leave it all out there until somebody tells you can't do it anymore, and then you play spoiler role. So I do believe the 49ers are going to still go out there and put forth an effort to win. The one key detail is Christian McCaffrey could still come back if the 49ers somehow made the playoffs. For the playoffs, there are 2 return designation available. So the 49ers could bring him back off IR. What compounds the situation, though, is it's not just Christian McCaffrey, but Jordan Mason also going on the IR, which leaves you with Isaac Guerendo. So Isaac Guerendo, 49ers 4th round pick, had a touchdown against Buffalo, has been an explosive athletic player and had some really nice plays this season, is going to be tasked with carrying the workload for the 49ers. Well, if you wanted the season to be over, one of your thought processes was, let's go ahead and get the young players on the field and give them some reps, right? That's usually what fans start saying is, hey, let's start transitioning, making sure our young players are getting out there and getting work. But really, the 49ers' young players are. Ricky Pearsall is playing a lot of football. He's out there. Renardo Green has been starting since about midway through the season. He's been playing a ton, so you don't need to get him out there. You look at Dominic Pooney. He started from the jump, so you don't need to get him out there. Now Isaac Guerendo is going to be carrying a lion's share of the carries for the 49ers running backs. Don't really need to get him out there. Malik Mustafa, he's a starting safety. Jacob Cowing's your starting punt returner. You could probably get him a little bit more work if he could block, but those are your young guys. Evan Anderson, who's an undrafted free agent, he just started this game. So kind of giving up on the season to play your young players is not good methodology. It just doesn't work. Those guys are already playing. They're filling significant roles. Oh, well, maybe we want to look at a couple key role players, see how they look about their future for this 49ers football team. Well, D. Winters has already been playing, so you're getting a clear look at him. Jair Brown is already playing. You're getting a key look at him. Then you look at Jalen Moore. He's been playing in place of Trent Williams. So he's gotten a good look. The 49ers pretty much know what they've got out there on the field. They don't need to take extra looks because those guys are already playing. So you're not benching your starters to play the backups. So there's no real reason in that regard to give up on the season. So what other reason could you possibly give up on the season? Well, if you just felt that it was going to endanger some current stars that are out there. So this is where you start looking at a guy like Fred Warner, who's playing with an ankle injury. If you give up on the season, well, then that means you can rest Fred Warner for the rest of the year and get him prepared. But knowing Fred Warner the way that I think we all do, nothing is going to keep him off the field until the 49ers are mathematically out of it. And even then, the guy might still try to push the 49ers on playing. Another reason why is Dre Greenlaw is currently in his 21-day practice window. Fred Warner has been itching and waiting for the day when Dre Greenlaw was going to come back. And now that it's ever so close, I can't see Fred Warner giving up on this thing. It's not in his mentality. He has no quit in his mentality. He's not giving up no matter how hurt he is. So that would be another process, though. Let's not really go into a situation where we have a problem with injury. So I think that those types of things we can kind of iron out. Now, when we're talking about other injuries right now, Kevin Givens is going to be out for the year. He tore a pectoral muscle, so that ended his season. And what a tough season it was for him. Comes back from the groin in first game back, injures his pec. That's frustrating. Unfortunate for Kevin Givens. He's out for the year. The 49ers, it doesn't really affect them defensive tackle-wise. They have an abundance of defensive tackles. What it does, though, is the depth of 49ers defensive tackles. you started in this game Evan Anderson. Evan Anderson didn't start because he deserves to be a starter. He started because the guys ahead of him were injured, and Kevin Givens was coming off an injury where they questioned what his ability was going to be to stay healthy as far as staying, not getting tired, right? So that was one of the things with him. So Jordan Elliott is still in concussion protocol. He's your normal starter. And so we'll see. He should be able to come out of concussion protocol this week. Him and Aaron Banks both should come out of concussion protocol. Those will be two big additions to your interior offensive line and your interior defensive line. And I think there's going to be a conversation about Ben Barch, who started at left guard for the 49ers, and a lot of people thought he did really well. I will say this. I think a lot of the offensive linemen looked and played a lot better against the Bills because of the weather conditions. It was hard for a defensive lineman to get active pass rush against each other. And all you have to do is look at Jake Brendle's PFF score, where he led the team in pass blocking. I think that's a clear picture on what you are capable of doing as a defensive line. Wasn't a lot of ability to run line stunts, to do some extra things because of the fact you would lose your footing. So I think that Aaron Banks and Jordan Elliott coming back this week will play a part of it. De'Amar Lenore is expected to practice Wednesday. That's good news. Nick Bosa and Trent Williams are going to be evaluated through the week. With Trent Williams, Kyle Shanahan said it's a little bit more significant. And we'll see. Jalen Moore, I think, has done a pretty good job through 2 games. Now, I will say the Packers game is probably the one we need to look at the most. Ben Barch played most of the fourth quarter of that, and then Jalen Moore, and I thought he did a pretty good job. But this game against Buffalo, it's going to be really hard to evaluate where they're at. But I think right now the 49ers know Trent Williams' ankle is not healing the way they expected, and Jalen Moore is going to have to be that guy moving forward. And I think we look at a situation where, with the things going on with Trent Williams and prayers to Trent Williams and his family with the loss of a child, we are going to have to just make sure we give him the same amount of grace we gave Charvarius Ward and continue to just lift them up in prayer and be a support system for Trent Williams in this trying time for him and his family. Our hearts go out to them. But Trent and the ankle is the least of the 49ers' worries right now. Yes, you would love to have Trent Williams. He wants to be on the field. He's itching to get back out there. But the truth is, he just got to make sure he's healthy. Getting him back full speed would be the best thing. And he's another one of those players that if you start becoming mathematically out of it, you shut down Trent Williams for the rest of the season, and you just start gearing him, Christian McCaffrey, Fred Warner, you shut him down, George Kittle. Those would be some guys you shut down potentially that have been dealing with injuries all season for next year. But I don't know if the 49ers are there yet. We're still talking through it. Dre Greenlaw is going to continue to practice with the Achilles. He has a shot to play this week against Chicago. If it's not this week, it is very likely he plays next week against the Los Angeles Rams. Talanoa Hufanga is going to have his practice window opened on Wednesday, and he's going to practice with a cast or a protective device. So they're not done with Hufanga coming back. I talked about this on the Ant Hill show. It's very likely that Hufanga probably comes back. His agent really wants him to come back. But the 49ers need to evaluate Talanoa Hufanga. And I think some of the inconsistencies with Jair Brown may force the 49ers to rethink going with Mustafa and Jair Brown for the future, and may bring Talanoa Hufanga back into the fold, that maybe they want Hufanga and Malik Mustafa to be the safety group. And also, I'm sure they'll address it in the draft again, where maybe they want to get a more rangy safety if that's possible. So that could be something the 49ers are interested in. So with that being said, 49ers potentially getting a little bit of reinforcement. Hufanga, right? That could be a big difference. Greenlaw coming back potentially. Jordan Elliott and Aaron Banks coming back into the fold. I think it's at least pretty interesting for the 49ers moving forward. Now, one of the tough things is going to be, what are the 49ers' actual chances of making the playoffs? Well, they're not very good. So they have the worst percentage-wise chance of making the playoffs out of any team in the NFC West. And right now, the 49ers are sitting at 11th in the playoff hunt. They are right behind the Los Angeles Rams and the Arizona Cardinals, who are 9 and 10, just ahead of them. And so we know that they're right there within the hunt. Seattle Seahawks are 7 and 5. They are currently the 3 seed. Now, here's where it gets interesting for these teams. Both of these teams, Seattle Seahawks and Arizona Cardinals, play each other. So Seahawks beat the Cardinals 2 weeks ago. Now they face off again. If the Arizona Cardinals win, both teams will go to 7 and 6. 49ers were able to beat Chicago, they would go to 6-7 and be a game back. They will not have a tiebreaker on anyone. They did beat Seattle. They play Arizona again in week 18, so that will be interesting to see what happens there. But 49ers definitely not out of it number-wise. And when you look at the Rams, they are right now 6-6, a game ahead of the 49ers, and they have a victory of the 49ers in week 3. They play the Buffalo Bills this week. Now, it's not in Buffalo. It's in Los Angeles, a little bit easier. But the Buffalo Bills are absolutely cooking as a football team right now. You got to believe the 49ers feel good about the Rams possibly losing to Buffalo, which means a win could tie them up with wins and losses with the Los Angeles Rams and potentially one game back of Arizona, who they play again, and Seattle. And the thing is, the schedule for none of these teams is really that easy. You look at the Rams, they're playing Buffalo. Then they play the Niners on Thursday Night Football. Then they're at the New York Jets, which Jets should have beaten Seattle. They're finding ways to lose right now. I don't think that's a for sure win for the Jets. But think about this. They go Buffalo, San Francisco, New York. Then they got Arizona and Seattle. So they got 2 more NFC West games ahead. So if the 49ers can catch the Rams and pass them by beating them, and then the Rams can do the 49ers a favor by beating Arizona and Seattle, you might get a situation where you can actually make the playoffs. And that's why it's not quite over yet. We look at the Seattle Seahawks current schedule, and they've got a tough one this week against Arizona. This is the big one. If Arizona loses, Seattle pulls away and potentially runs away with the NFC West. If Arizona is able to win at home in Arizona, then that changes everything, because then the Seahawks play versus Green Bay, versus Minnesota, at Chicago, at Los Angeles. There is a real chance that they could go 1-4 in those 5-game matchups. So I'm giving them the Chicago win. That's not a guarantee. That's on a Thursday night in Chicago in December, the day after Christmas. So no easy games for Seattle. So it's one of those things when you're looking at the schedules, and the Arizona Cardinals by far have what appears to be the easiest schedule down the stretch. Of course, they got the big one for Seattle. They need to win. Then they're versus New England. Now, 2 weeks ago, I would have said that's a easy win. Now, New England is at least competitive. At Carolina, looked like a for sure win, but the way that they're playing right now, that's not guaranteed. Push Kansas City to the limit, push Tampa Bay to the limit in back-to-back weeks. Not going to be easy going 3,000 miles across country to play Carolina at a 10 a.m. start time. Then they're at Los Angeles, and then they play the 49ers to cap it off. So if you look at the schedules like that, it does not foreshow that the 49ers are out of this. And maybe it's just holding on to wishful thinking. Maybe it's just holding on to the hopes that the 49ers can win. But let's just think about this from a 49ers perspective. The San Francisco 49ers schedule, of course, is not easy, but there are winnable football games. And when I talk about winnable football games, you don't see the Buffalo Bills on the schedule. Now, there's one really, really tough game coming up, but you're at home versus Chicago this week. That's a winnable game. And I know they got a lot of losses, and they haven't really won a lot of the games they're supposed to, but that's a winnable football game. Chicago is a team that they can beat. They're at home. Then on Thursday Night Football, they welcome the Rams. That is a winnable football game. The Rams are winning, but not looking invincible by any stretch of the imagination. They're still a 6-6 football team. That is winnable. At Miami. Now, going across the country is not easy, but that is still a winnable football game the way Miami has played inconsistently this season. The tough one is going to be versus Detroit. All of these are tough, but that one right there does not exactly spell win for the 49ers. And then at Arizona, which could, if the 49ers were able to win the rest of their football games, potentially be for the division if everything broke right. So there is a case in a scenario that the 49ers can still win the division. And the way that the teams have been flipping up and down through the season, 1 week they're number one in the division, the next week they're last, I think there's still an opportunity for this season to play out. I do think that game against Detroit is going to be very tough for the 49ers to win. I think Detroit has a distinct advantage there. The 49ers are going to have to prove it over the next 3 weeks. If they win those games over the next 3 weeks, they have an opportunity to be in the conversation to make the playoffs. If they lose any of the next 3, it is a wrap. They are done, and we're talking about this season being over. So I don't think they're ready to call it a day yet, and I think Arizona knocking off Seattle this week would go a long way in showing that the 49ers are still in it. If Rams lose to the Buffalo Bills, very likely, and the Arizona Cardinals defeat the Seattle Seahawks, which is a 50-50 proposition, and the 49ers beat Chicago, 49ers are within a game, and it's at least a continued conversation. Those are still meaningful football games. But what do the 49ers need to do to win? Because they have some real problems when it comes to injuries. I mean, we talked about the running back position. I had talked about the fact that you're going to get Isaac Guerrero starting at running back. Well, right now, you don't have another running back on the roster besides Isaac Guerrero. So we know that Patrick Taylor Jr. is on the 49ers practice squad. He's going to be elevated to the active roster and become a part of the 53. That is almost a guarantee. But there's another roster spot that they're definitely going to have to fill. And so who would they go with that? So let's talk first about Keyshawn Vaughn. Keyshawn Vaughn was with the 49ers through training camp, and then they kept him on the practice squad for most of the season until they went with Patrick Taylor on the practice squad over him. So Keyshawn Vaughn would be my first assumption that the 49ers would actually bring him to the active 53-man roster, and you want to have 3 running backs available. So my guess is Keyshawn Vaughn could be that guy. The outside chance is Matt Breida, who was with the 49ers in training camp, has still got a lot of speed, understands the offense, could catch the ball in the backfield. I think he's another guy. Just for reference, who's still available out there? Well, Boston Scott is available. You got Damian Harris, who used to be with Buffalo. Matt Breida that I brought up. You got Latavius Murray, Jerick McKinnon. Those guys are available. So you could go with those guys. And I think that's kind of where it ends right there. So I think the 49ers will probably go with Keyshawn Vaughn and Matt Breida as the 2 possibles. But I think more than the most likely is we're going to see a situation where you're going to get Isaac Guerrero, Patrick Taylor, and Keyshawn Vaughn as your 3-man running back room. Is that good enough to win football games? I don't know. That depends on what Brock Purdy and this 49ers offense is going to do, with the weapons that they have. Right now, the offense has been struggling. I do believe that the Buffalo game was a little bit different just because of the situation, but they did not look good against the Packers. But that was with Brandon Allen. So it's going to be interesting for sure to see what the 49ers end up doing and how they decide to attack this thing. But they've got a long ways to go before the season's over, and whether they should go ahead and chalk it up and move on, I think is another story for this football team. And I think that's, where the 49ers are trying to decide right now. I think as an organization, they want to push forward. They want to try to make the playoffs. I don't think the season is over in that regard. I do think that they're a game away from the season potentially being over. I think a Seattle victory against Arizona and improving to 8-5 would make it extremely difficult for the 49ers to make the playoffs. And so in that case, it would pretty much be a done deal. But an Arizona win and a 49ers win, a Rams loss, and next thing you know, things get pretty interesting. So it's not out of the picture for the 49ers to make the playoffs. But the other question is, do you actually want the 49ers to squeak into the playoffs? That's one of the arguments that I've been hearing is, well, at this point, what's the point? And so let's play a little bit of devil's advocate. If the 49ers get into the playoffs, depending on where they are ranked, and as a divisional winner, we know they'll be one of those top 4 seeds, it definitely changes your drafting potential and where you're going to be at. The 49ers have been consistently drafting in the late 20s during this stretch with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, especially since 2019. You throw in some situations right where they weren't, but 2020 they had the trade where Buckner, where they picked 15. You've had other situations where you've been there and then you traded away your Trey Lance picks, but that's normally where they are into the first round, just like they were last year's draft. Well, the 49ers could potentially lose 4 or 5 spots depending on if they make the playoffs or not. Is that significant enough for you to not want an opportunity to make the playoffs? I know this for a fact that nobody in the 49ers organization is thinking that it's a better situation to not make the playoffs. I do, however, believe there's a lot of 49ers fans that believe it is. And it all comes down to mindset. Now, what can the 49ers do over the next 5 games to convince people that they have a run in them? Well, this thing is going to completely sort itself out. If the 49ers go on the stretch that we were talking about, they beat Chicago, they beat LA, and they beat Miami, well, they may have proven that they're good enough to be a team that's dangerous in the playoffs. And why do I say that? Well, when you get on a run in December, sometimes that can carry you. All you have to do is look back in recent history at a team like the New York Football Giants. They were able to get hot in 2 seasons, 2008 and 2011, and it carried them all the way through the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. They were not one of the top teams. In fact, they were 9-7. They were a team that barely got in, but yet when they got in the playoffs, they were hot, got the right matchups, and were able to win. I'm not telling you this is that 49ers team is that team this season. I'm just saying until it's over, there's still that chance. Yeah, you might cost you if you made the playoffs 4 or 5 spots in the draft, and that would be frustrating. But imagine if you did get hot. You were able to get into the playoffs, and you were able to get a favorable matchup in week 1. The Seattle Seahawks are sitting at number 3 right now in the NFC conference. So if they're at 3, Atlanta's at 4 at 6-6. The 49ers are only a game out of Atlanta for that spot. Depending on how things go, you could actually finish in the 3rd seed, which means you have a home playoff game against the 6th seed. Who is the 6th seed? Well, we won't know yet, but teams like Green Bay and Minnesota seem the most likely one of those teams to be the 6th seed. That would be really tough. Let me look at where it sits right now with the playoffs. As of right now, if you just looked at it, the Seahawks would be playing the Green Bay Packers. The Washington Commanders are right there, though, at the 7th seed. So you have a situation where there's no guarantee with the games that are going to be played between Green Bay, Minnesota, and Detroit that Green Bay doesn't fall to 7 and the Commanders move up to 6. A first round playoff against the Washington Commanders could be a winnable football game. And then you let what happens next play out. So if that was the case and you were able to win and the 7 seed Packers were able to beat Philadelphia, you could actually see a situation where you don't actually go to Detroit until the NFC Championship game. Like, those are the things that can happen. And we're way out on our skis on this one. But I'm just saying that's why I think the 49ers won't be willing to kind of throw this one in or phone this one in. But I think they're close. I think they are. I think that if they were to lose Chicago or they were to lose to the Rams, I do believe that they would start resting people. This season would potentially be over. And with that being said, what would the 49ers do after that? So if you were, and I posted this for channel members on YouTube, if the 49ers season is over or it comes to an end over the next couple of weeks mathematically, what would you want to do for the 49ers in 2025? What would the priority be? Do you just want to bring back this roster, just bring them all back, but hopefully it's a healthy run? That's something that 49ers could do. Minor retooling, change a couple pieces here and there. A significant rebuild, start trading away some of your key players, change the whole formula for how the 49ers win. Or, what would you do? And in this case, what if the season wasn't over yet? So I was looking at this, and I think that one thing that I want to see is, and I believe right now I'm in this season isn't over yet category because I just see an avenue for the 49ers to make it. And a lot of things have to go their way. They're not in control of their own destiny. But you never want to count out anyone. Now, they haven't done anything to prove that they can win. They're going to have to earn that respect over the next several weeks. But they are at a 5.5-point favorite over the Chicago Bears. And I think with a win, they could potentially be favored over the Los Angeles Rams as well on Thursday Night Football. They get those 2 wins, and it definitely changes the game as all of a sudden they're 7-7. So I don't think the season's over yet. Now, with that being said, I would not run back the roster healthy, even if they don't make the playoffs. I'm not saying, hey, let's just bring everyone back and run it back. I think the 49ers need to find a way to get a little bit bigger. So I would be in the minor retooling category. I don't think a significant rebuild is what you do, but I do think there's going to be players that are going to move on. I think the Jair Brown thing hasn't really worked out. You need to figure out a safety, whether that's Talanoa Hufanga or someone else. That needs to be evaluated. I think Charvarius Ward is going to end up moving on in free agency, and the 49ers have already started to move along when it comes to the cornerback position. Renardo Green, Deommodore Lenoir are going to be those 2 guys. So I think that's a category. 49ers are going to have to make some decisions when it comes to Drake Greenlaw. So retooling is going to happen, but I think you try to keep the core pieces together. You're rolling with this core until the wheels fall off, and then you have to go for your significant rebuild. What they're trying to do is rebuild through the draft in a reload category. Is we don't actually have to rebuild. We just reload with talented young players that step in when the time is right. But linebacker is going to be a big reason why they need to. I think Aaron Banks on the offensive side of the ball could go. 49ers need to retool the tight end position behind George Kittle. It didn't work with Braden Willis and Cameron Latu. That is over. Jake Tunges is not the answer. Go ahead and move on from him. He's not going to be a key factor for your tight end position. And I think that Eric Saubert, if you're bringing him back, he has to be tight end 3. They have to figure out tight end 2 behind George Kittle. It is imperative. Whether they attack it in the draft or free agency, it is something they have to do. And the 49ers are going to have to kind of figure some things out with some certain players. So I am in the category as of right now. The season is not over. But if the season does come to an end, I think minor retooling needs to be done, including maybe a change in the coaching staff when it comes to special teams with Coach Brian Schneider. So there's going to be changes that are going to come the way. Let me know what you guys think. Which would you guys prefer in this situation? You want to run this roster back healthy, minor retooling, like I said, significant rebuild. And what are your feelings right now? Do you think this season is over? I'm really curious. Let me know in the comment section down below. But until then, the 49ers still have some key games to play. I know it's been a frustrating season, frustrating for all of us. And hopefully the 49ers can put together some key wins. And maybe for some of you, don't want them to win anymore. Draft placement is the key. You want them to get closer to the top 10. And I understand your thought process and mindset on that. The competitor in me wouldn't allow me to do that. As a former coach, that's all we'd want to do is win. No matter where we were, we always just wanted a shot. And coming up a half game short of making the playoffs, that happened to me when I was coaching one year. I came a half game away from making the playoffs. Potentially one half of football cost us. So that's the thing. Sometimes you get caught up to and you don't get to get it done. Hopefully for the 49ers, they'll figure this thing out. And if it is the end, well, then, what's the focus going to be? How do you retool this football team? Really curious. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Really appreciate it. Listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating. This episode was brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.